Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. This is all set up. The set, the lighting, even the detail of the condensation on the bottle top. The image has a natural narrative and captures the object just before it lands. Or does it? In this video I'll show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so let's start with the subject. So that would be a bottle top. So basically, just take that off the bottle. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, I introduced some condensation to this. There is absolutely nothing on it at the moment. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is mix up a solution of liquid glucose and water and just spray that onto the surface. Now I find that this works really well for producing a condensation effect, which will last several hours. Okay, so this is the solution and I've just put that into a small spray bottle here. Now it does get quite messy, and being glucose it can be sticky. So I'm just going to place a few pieces of paper towel down just to soak up any excess, and I'm going to place the bottle top itself just in the end of this clamp so I don't end up with all the stuff all over my fingers. Okay, so now I can just spray this onto the bottle top. There we go. And you may be able to make out that we've got a nice covering of condensation on there, which is exactly what I want. Okay. So having prepared the bottle top, I'll just put that to one side for the time being. And we can then concentrate on building the rest of the set. So what I'm going to do is just place a couple of wooden blocks on the table here. There we go. And then on top of those, I'm just going to place a piece of slate. Now I'm using this slate on purpose because it does have a slight sheen to it. And that's going to be quite important, as most of the light will be coming from the top. So the only light which is going to affect the bottom of the bottle top will be reflected off this surface. So having a slight sheen to it is a good advantage. Okay, so that goes on there. And then this will go on here. And this gives you an idea of just how we're going to achieve this. Instead of dropping the bottle top and hoping I capture the image at the right place in time, by using this clamp, I should be able to place everything exactly where I want it. All right, so that's the subject built. So the next thing to do will be to look at the camera position. And fairly obviously, I'm going to need to place the camera in front here. So I'm going to use this tripod, just placed at the front here, like that. And on the top of the tripod, I'm just going to place my camera. I'm using a medium format camera with a 120mm lens on the front of it. So the equivalent for a full frame would be around about 75mm. This is a macro lens, which allows me to go down to 1:1 magnification. Now you will need either extension tubes or a macro lens to do this, because I'm going to get quite close. Okay, so let's just pop that on the top of the tripod here. I'm going to start by just winding that up to an appropriate height, which I think should be about there somewhere. Now the next thing I want to do is tether this camera into Capture One software so it's easy to follow along and I can show you the results as I get them. There we are, that's all tethered now. And the other advantage of using a tethered system like this, if you're doing some form of macro work, is that it allows you to use live view remotely on a big screen. so you can really see the image. We'll come to that a little later. Okay, so with all that on, next thing to do will be just to have a quick look at what settings I have on the camera at the moment. So these are the settings. It's in full manual mode. I have a shutter speed of 125th of a second, which is the flash sync speed for that camera, ISO 100, and at the moment I've got an aperture of f8. I'm using f8 because it's literally the middle of the range, and most lenses are optimized for around about that value. That doesn't always apply to macro lenses, however, as they tend to have a much wider range. Okay, so with all that set, the next thing to do would be just to line up the shot. So what I'm going to do is just look through the viewfinder here, and the first thing I need to do is just focus the image. There we are, somewhere around there. I think that's actually a little big in the frame, so I'm just going to move that back a little, like that. Just refocus that. There we are. That's possibly a little too far. It wants to be somewhere in between. Bring that somewhere forward. There, that's a reasonable starting point, I think. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do before I set any lighting up is just take an exposure just to make sure that I don't get any contamination from the house lights with these settings. So I can either do that from the camera or I can instigate the exposure from the software. There we are, and you can see from that that there's virtually no image there at all. This is just the clamp, and we're going to erase that anyway, so I think that's reasonable. Okay, right, so the next thing to do would be to set a light. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to light this predominantly from above, which is the natural direction that you would come across if this was going to be hitting a surface, either the floor or a worktop or something similar. So I just need to put a light around here somewhere. I've just got a very small flash head here, just in a retort stand. So I'm going to start with it directly over the top of the subject in this direction and in line with the lens in this direction. So just to get me started in terms of the exposure, I'm just going to use TTL metering in the camera. So we'll just grab that and see what we get. Now you may have seen that the flash fired twice, so the first time was to set the exposure and the second time was to actually capture the image. So this is what we've got. So we can see from this that the exposure is not bad, but the lighting is not quite what I want. I've got a bit of a shadow down here. This is not very well defined at all. So what I want to do is make this a little more contrasty. And one of the ways that you can do that is by using the inverse square law. So if I were to drop this light down to around here somewhere, and hopefully that's still out of the picture, I'll just check that in the viewfinder. Only just, but it is out of the picture. Now, I've obviously made it very, very much closer to the subject, and therefore, due to the inverse square law, I'm going to need to take quite a lot of energy out of that particular light. So I would suspect that I'm going to need to take probably 2 stops off that. Okay, so again, I can do this from the camera control here. So I'll just go into the flash control, take it out of TTL, select that light, and just take 2 stops off. There we are. So with that, I'm ready to grab another image. Okay, so you can see in this image that we're actually starting to get there. Got a bit of flare at the top here, which is to be expected having that light so close. The actual bottle top itself is not quite in the right place anymore, so I need to just adjust that. But you should be able to see the difference in lighting. If I switch between the previous one, this one here, to this one, this has started to become a little more edgy. So the first thing I want to do is just adjust the position of this because it's not quite right now. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is just go into live view, like so. And just to aid me, I'm going to turn the modeling light on this flash. There we go. And we'll make that a bit bigger. And now I can watch the monitor whilst manipulating the item here. I'm just going to bend that ever so slightly down. There, that's the sort of thing I want. Okay. So with that in something like the right position now, I can see that I've moved it a bit and it's not quite in focus. And now I can focus it from the software in live view here. There we go. So if I just zoom into the very edge of this, there we are, you can start to see the focus point. So if I just move that, there. The focus point's around here somewhere. Right, so we'll get rid of live view. And we'll just grab an image and see what we get now. Okay, so after a few adjustments, that's not a bad position, but the lighting is still leaving quite a lot to be desired. So what I need to do is generally adjust this, and the first thing I think I will need to do is just take it back a little. So I'm just going to move the whole thing back to here. What that should do is just make this area at the front here a little bit darker, so it's easier to see the shadow. So let's just grab that and see if that's anywhere close to being the right position. Oh yes, now we're getting there. And you can see what I meant about using the surface here to actually illuminate the underside of the bottle top. We've lost the edge, but I can bring that back a little later. I'll show you how to do that. The other thing is that generally this area at the front is a little too bright. So what I want to do is actually mask off part of this light. Now in order to do that, I'm just going to use a small piece of card, just with some sticky tape on it. And I'm basically just going to place that over the front of the light like this. And that should also address the amount of flare that I'm getting. I might need to adjust the position of that and the energy, of course, but we'll see how we go. Oh yes, so that's got rid of the flare completely, which is good, and it's brought down this area at the front. This is what we had before, this is what we've got now, but we've actually lost quite a lot of the detail completely now around the outside here. So as I mentioned before, we need to put that back. And the easiest way to do that is just with a couple of reflectors. So here I have some pieces of card just on small pieces of wood, just attached with blue tack. And I'm just going to place these so they recycle some of the light. So I have one at this side and one at this side. And once again, I'm just going to use live view to help me put those in the right position. So I'll just turn live view on. I'll just make that a bit bigger. Now if I move this too far in, you should be able to see it encroaching onto the picture there. I just need to bring that back slightly. And the same on the other side. Yes, there it is encroaching into the picture. Just take that back a little. About there. We'll see what that looks like. Okay. So once again, I'll get rid of live view. We'll just grab that. There, that's lightened up this crown quite substantially. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. Right, so this is really starting to come on now, but in the original image, you will have seen that there was some detail in the background. It wasn't just black. Now that was achieved with another piece of wood just at the back here. So what I'm going to do is just place a couple of blocks on here, and then I'm going to use this large piece of wood and just pop that on there. Now I want to use a piece which has a nice bit of green going on, so I would think something like that might be about right. And to illuminate that, I'm going to use a very small flash just down here. So here we are, I've got another small flash head. I'm just going to place this in here. And this is why, or one of the reasons anyway, that I put this stage up on these blocks of wood, so that I can actually slide this underneath it. Okay, I can now just grab an image and we'll just see what the background looks like. So that's the starting point, I suppose. I think I need to turn that down quite substantially. And I'd also like to get it into a bit better of a shape. There's no shape to this as it is at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just move the whole thing a little bit closer to the flash. I might even move the flash a little bit further forward. And I'm just going to take maybe, 3 stops off that flash just to see what that looks like. Select the flash control, select that flash, and just take 3 stops off it. There we go. There we are. So there's 2 things to see here. First of all, in this image, I had the other flash still firing, which was a bit of an error. But in this one, I've turned that off now, and you can see the colour in the background, but it's still far too wide a spread. So what I want to do is just narrow that down. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is add a donut, just a round mask, to the front of the flash. So we can just pop that in there like that. Okay, so with that in place, let's grab that again. Okay, so that has had the desired effect, but it's also cut the exposure down quite a long way. So I'm just going to add, 2 stops to that. There we go. Right, so with that done, we'll grab that again and see what we get this time. There, that's about spot on, I think. That's the sort of thing that I want. So we're getting a nice coloration in the background. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is turn this flash back on, and we'll just grab another image and see what we get with them both firing. There, that's really starting to get there now. But the obvious thing that you can see in this image is that the depth of field is really very small. If I just zoom in, you can see we have sharp bits around here, but not really anywhere else. So in order to address that, what I'm going to do is stack a load of images together. So what I'm going to get the camera to do, and a lot of cameras these days are capable of doing this, is first of all focus on the very back, then focus on the very front of the subject, and then ask it to create a series of images at discrete steps in between. And I think for something of this sort of size, at this sort of magnification, we're looking at around about 2 to 1. I think something like 20 images should suffice. However, if you pick an aperture which is too small, as in something like f8, then the result you'll get won't be as sharp as if you actually opened it up, which is surprising but true of quite a lot of macro lenses. So what I'm going to do is take this down by 1 stop from f8 to 5.6. And I'll also need to take 1 stop of energy off both flashes. So I can do that as well. There we are. So before we get into setting up the stacking, I'll just make sure that I get the exposure correct. Okay, not bad. This is what we had before. this is what we've got now. So you can see the difference in the focus point, and I think generally the exposure of the overhead light is possibly a little high, so I'm just going to take it down by maybe half a stop. There we are, and I've taken half a stop off the background light as well. So let's just see what that's like. There we are, that looks a bit better. Okay, so now it's time to set up the focus stack. So what I'm going to do is once again start up live view. This will make it considerably easier to do the focusing. And I want to concentrate on just the bottle top itself. So the first thing that I want to actually focus on is the very back of the bottle top. So I'm just going to zoom into the back, something like that, and then using the focus controls here, I can just adjust the lens until the back is just about in focus. Just zoom all the way in. I think I want to go slightly further back. There. Okay, so that is the furthest part of the image that I want to be in focus. So what I can do now is set the camera up. So I'll set up the software on the camera here to store that furthest point. So we'll just start up the focus stacking software like that. That's the point now stored. So now I can zoom out a little and we can navigate round to the front of the subject, and here on the crown somewhere, and once again just use the controls here to bring that into focus. There we are. So this is the furthest point and this is in nice sharp focus now. So once again just store that point. There we are. And now I can put in how many images I want. So it was on 10. We'll wind that up to 20. So with all that done, what I can do is just instigate that. And these are the series of images that we captured with that stack. They're all looking okay. Okay, so now I have that sequence of images all safely stored away in here. But there's one more image that I need to take before I finish with the capture side of things, and that is just a blank slate. So what I need to do is very carefully remove the subject without moving any of the lights or the camera or anything else. And with the subject out of the way, what I'll do now is just capture another image, and I can use that to rebuild the background. There we are. So this is my clean slate, if you like, and that will help in the post-production. Okay. So now it's just time to move all these images into Helicon Focus 8 so that I can stack them all up. So this is the focus stacking software, Helicon Focus 8, and I've loaded up the 20 images that I captured earlier. So in order to instigate the focus stacking, what I'm going to do is just check that I've got method A. I find this to be the best method for this type of subject. And I'll just click the render button. There we are, and you can see on this side the render that has been produced. And it is very, very sharp from front to back. And you can see on the tile actually the area of focus, which is just what I want. And with that, I'll just import that into Photoshop. So finally, here I am in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the file which I produced in Helicon 8, and I've also loaded up the blank slate, which was the last image that I actually captured. So the first job is just to make a stack of these two images. So just go to File, come down to Scripts, load files into Stack, just ask it to add the open files, and just click on OK. There we are. Now I didn't ask it to line these up, so they're not aligned as we are at the moment. So what I need to do is just change the opacity on the top one to about 50%, and I should be able to line that up by eye. There we are. About there should do it. Good. So I can now just change that back again. So with that little detail done, what I can do now is just get rid of all of this support for the bottle top. So with that layer selected, I'll just add a layer mask and make sure that black is selected as the foreground colour. Get a paintbrush, and initially I'll just wipe out the area where that is. Now as I approach the edge of the bottle top, what I can do is just zoom in and be a bit more precise. There we are. With that I can just zoom back out again, and here we have a fully floating bottle top. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just to produce a stamp of this image as it is. So the way to do that is just make sure that no layer is selected. Hold down the Shift key, the Control key, the Alt key, and just press the E key. There we go. And that's just made me this new layer at the top here, which is a combination of everything which is underneath it. And to this layer I'm just going to add a small amount of motion blur. And the way I'm going to do that is just use the filter. So Filter, Blur Gallery, just come down to Path Blur, and we'll sort of align the path with the direction of fall, something like that. Speed it up a little. Maybe add a bit of a taper on it. Speed it up a bit more. There we are, something like that. Just click on OK. There we are. I'm just going to add a mask to that layer and just invert that. And now just with white as the foreground colour, I'm just going to bring that back in. Doesn't matter if you go too far, which is what I've done here, and you can see there's all sorts of colours and things coming through which you don't necessarily want, because you're going to change the blend mode, which should get rid of all that. So we'll just go to darken or darker colour. I think I like darker colour better. We'll go with that, and just finally I'll just take the opacity of that down ever so slightly. There we go, just to bring the other bit back through. There we are. So it just leaves me with a crop. So I'm just going to pick 16:9. Since I'm using this for video, that should suffice. There we are. Just move that in the frame a little. There. And there we have it. So absolutely everything about this image has been set up. It was built around a set. The condensation has been applied manually, but the result is reasonably believable, I think. And I think overall that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.